Not everything is a win. There's always something that sticks out for all the wrong reason. Granted, it is a subjective discussion. Who knows? If there's someone out there that really love one or two anime in the list, that would be a fun task to take on. Nevertheless, this is my list of what I think are the worst anime of 2018. Truth be told, I thought last year wasn't as cringeworthy compared to 2017. Sure, there are bad ones, but it didn't really have me cringing or yelling at the top of my lung out of agony and rage. Maybe I have grown accustomed to it. Isn't that worrisome? Perhaps I didn't look too deep enough to find more bad ones, but then again, why go further downhill? Regardless, if they are bad as 2017 or worse, they are still what I consider below average. You'll most likely hear many of the choices before, so there's not much to add on. This is the 5 worst anime of 2018. Before Tokyo Ghoul Re, anime adaptation took the world by storm with its ludicrous pacing and direction. This series is my first experience, and honestly, the worst of the two. If you can believe that. Long ago, a demon named Daiki destroyed Taikobo's home and clansmen. Much later on, he is assigned to be in charge of a crucial, mysterious project known as Hoshin. His task is to find all immortals living in the human world and seal them away for good. It's up to him to set the world straight, whether it's from his training or his own heart. I never read the manga, so there's no comparison coming on my end. That said, I have heard many things on the adaptation. It was rushed, change of characteristics, skipped tons of developments and introductions, and so on. I went in after seeing the fans being hyped, believing this is the adaptation that they have been waiting for. Now they are disgusted with what they receive. As a person who was new, I can say it is really not good. The pacing is noticeably incredibly bad. The original source has 206 chapters to my knowledge, so to think the anime has to cram in all within 23 episodes is insane. Furthermore, there's one episode of a recap along with 2 recap specials. Gundam Seed Destiny much? Because of the pacing, so many characters don't have an intro. You see a new guy, and already you'll be lost. They don't even bother to tell you who and where they came from. One episode to the next, you will be wondering if you accidentally skip an episode. It's only in the second or third or fourth, I don't know. The pacing is too crazy to wonder how many arcs was skipped or dealt with in an episode. Anyway, the last arc is where they decided to slow down, and yet I find myself confused and uncaring. There are even more characters being introduced, leave me no time to know their names. Some aren't used as death bags, so you're supposed to know and care. The story and characters suffer really badly. Taikobo and very few are decent, but not enough to justify the connection. It's a shame too, because there are elements that could be enjoyable when it comes to the action and certain characters' interactions. It's like it advised us to read a manga to fill in the missing data like a wiki. The action could be inventive despite being an old series, but it could have given us more time to understand its universe. The lore is a mess, and I still couldn't understand how their supernatural element works. You just have to know they can do this or that just cause. The animation is average. It's not the worst, but it's not gripping enough to be exciting. One has a character stand still, attacking, and it looks awkward with everyone approaching it and somehow die. For some reason, the sound department sounds pretty retro, like the studio decided to use old clips from the last adaptation here. I don't know, it sounds really mono. At least the opening songs are pretty neat in my opinion. By the time the series ends, you remain lost, but you may care no more. There's a plot twist that felt very underwhelming due to the lack of focus. Hell, one antagonist did something major and you wouldn't know until the end. It's bizarre. The ending is fine, but again, the direction is really bad, with a weak presentation, mediocre characters, a confusing story, and a pacing that makes Tokyo Ghoul Re look slow. It's rather tragic for fans to receive this bad execution. Maybe one day I will read the manga, but the mess will never go away. Honestly, I don't think it's that awful. It's just a bona fide mediocrity. The evil mastermind Sister Jill sends her minions filled with transformed beasts to cause mayhem. They are known as Panther Claw. This call for Honey Kisaragi to spring into action and transform into Cutie Honey, stopping evil from terrorizing her home. Little does she know, the Sister Jill has another agenda in mind. Honey's airborne element fixing device, the tool that allows Honey to transform to 7 different forms. Will Honey prevail or fall to the evil's hand? 2018 was like a year of adapting really old series or remake them, such as Devilman Crybaby. This series is no exception. The problem is Devilman Crybaby changes the style to his own, as well as the narrative that happens to cater well with today's audience. It's a problem because not only fans of the original will be disappointed, but it doesn't feel as inspired as other series that are done with care. I'm not too familiar with the franchise, but I can't help but think how dated it is. It's likely due to the execution more so than the franchise, albeit spawned from the 70s. Crybaby fits well with the modern time with the writing, the artwork, albeit not suitable for everyone's taste, and the narration. Sure, I place it as one of my disappointing anime of 2018, but it doesn't mean I thought it was mediocre, let alone bad. With Universe, I can say that it is. Like I said earlier, it feels rather passe, including old jokes with shameless perverts. Honestly, I have seen tons of anime, and encountering that again reminded me this exists. Not sure if I want to say kudos to modern era, but I'll bet it's pleasing to current time audience, especially with that boy. Anyway, the story could have been fun, but the tone is uneven. Sometimes it gets really silly, which is fine, and sometimes it gets really dark. It can be done fine, but it shifts quickly back and forth without a room to comprehend the events. The characters are mostly uninteresting. I appreciate the interaction with certain characters to garner some interest, but it's not enough to make them appealing. They are pretty standard for the most part, with basic characteristics like Honey as true beauty or Danbi as a complete pervert. Seriously, it's been ages. This series is designed with Monster of the Week concept, but series like SSSS Gridman, it can give characters meanings. But who cares when you have a really young boy groping? Time sure has changed. The presentation is not too bad, but there are plenty of bad spots. The art is decent enough to capture the original feel in some regards, but when it comes to action, it's rather lousy. Once the action ensues, a blue portal tunnel appears, and that's where the battle takes place. All the time. It's a lazy technique to avoid a quality action sequence that involves with environment in which could have granted more variety. The animation isn't so bad, especially when the action actually can be decent, but the blue background contrast brings down the intensity and in some ways sucks out the energy. It's sad because the series relies on the action, which is disappointing when it couldn't deliver. The ending is not too bad, though it does go pretty crazy for better or worse. Some parts are dismissed, which is odd, and some parts are wacky, but knowing the series' nature is probably fine for what it is. It's not god-awful, at least in my opinion. It's just a very solid, mediocre work. Maybe because it's dated, or maybe because the director didn't do a swell job, but it definitely needs another take in the future. This version is no good. Isekai series seems to be hated by many, whether it's because of Sword Art Online or something else. If this series was the first, then it's completely justified. Yuto uses his phone to take a selfie with the local shrine's divine mirror. an urban legend that he decided to test it out. Before he know it, he's taken away to another world, a world filled with the old Norse myth. With the power of knowledge and a smartphone that apparently has solar power, he will fight for the Wolf Clan along with a group of magic-wielding warriors. Right from the start, the series throws you to a battle, leaving you wondering, what the hell did I miss? Normally, it begins with an actual introduction to the cast, story, and everything you need to know to get engaged. This one, however, does not. Sure, it was narrated by the protagonist Yuto, later on that is, but you barely have any idea why they are fighting and how the world operates. Your first sight is a battle and ends with practically a new slave, or what they call it, little sister. It feels like we began the third arc without knowing. It does explain the story later on, including how Yuto even got into the world, which is hilarious since I have to write a synopsis that's technically a spoiler for anime viewers. But you couldn't care less by this point. It's really a harem series covered by a generic story. You would notice it immediately from the first episode, even when it began with a battle. It's uninspiring to say the least. The characters are pretty forgettable. Yuto is average, but look, he has plenty of future wives. They barely have a character, but I guess the idea is to pick the best wife from their single-dimensional trait and design. The funny part about it is how the male designs are pretty bland, yet female designs, mainly Yuto's harem, are put into effort. They're just throw whatever, create a character default for the male, and there you have it, a side character. The enemies aren't worth checking, including the brother with a weak backstory and credibility. It's all about how these girls can please their father. I know what I said. But hey, since it takes place in a war, the action should be good, right? No, the tactic is pretty simple-minded, even though Yuto has to cheat with his smartphone. At least it's being realistic, I guess. It's uneventful and lack energy to get you excited. It's like watching Kingdom without the fun, or the intensity, or compelling character, or it's best to say it's mediocre. Perhaps it wouldn't be so much weak if it weren't for the weak presentation. It's pretty bland and pretty bad. With uninspired battle settings and weak characters, the presentation complements the lackluster action. Even when there could have been a deadly battleground, the lack of impact is strikingly bad. They are slain like a parody movie characters parodying a death scene. Intentional bad acting and all. They just fall and cry. Nothing that screams horrifying. On top of that, the one-on-one battles are also weak, with poor animation and average sound effects that seem to repeat for all weapons, as if weapons clash and make the same sound, no matter what type or size. The ending is just there for the sake of having a good ending. Hilarious considering how the climax set up for an intense battle, yet the focus didn't bother to care to show it. Hell, they didn't even bother to show how Yuto is favor his clan's strength that leads to the epilogue scene. But who cares? Happy ending! Yeah, this is not a good anime. I don't find myself cringy or going rage, so it's not unholy awful. Still, with a plenty of drawbacks, it was enough to consider it bad. What if you want to play Where's Waldo with a map reverse that has nothing but Waldo on the surface? It would be impossible to miss, right? Well, what if you change Waldo to Art Era? You will have this series. You wish to be a light novel author. With many declines, his dream is near diminished. A light novel won an award, and it turns out it's written by his little sister, Suzuka. Under the pen name Chikayo Towano, she placed him in charge while holding her feelings, similar to the story she wrote. What will happen next? This is somewhat similar to Eromanga Sensei, only if I recall correctly, they're biological siblings. I won't discuss if this is acceptable in terms of romance, but that's not my problem. The problem lies in many things. The one is the most takeaway aspect. When it comes to the plot and characters, it's your average romantic comedy. There's nothing that sets apart from other series. It's the safest grounded criteria of its genre. It includes the character tropes that you are familiar with many other series. It's not necessarily that bad, since I am fine with generic materials, though it is uninspired. You just keep watching for a different reason. We will get to that very soon. The side characters are served more of a harem girls for you. They're not out there to get developments or present more dimension. It's your average tropes that exist for the sake of ecchi. Yes, this series is also an ecchi genre, at least to my knowledge. Majority of the cast are stripped down for the sake of fan service, or lewd as they would call it. Even when some would decline, they still end up doing it. Someone must be having a little too much fun. While everything is average, the main aspect that broke people apart is the animation and art. I am no nitpicker, but you don't even have to be one to know how many errors there are within an episode. It's very baffling how many times you can spot one with each frame. The character design, whether it is the body size or faces, is incredible. They are barely, if not ever, consistent. It's hard to tell which one is considered good or even similar to the original source if it can't present the right design. Some people will pass the errors and not worry too much. But the problem is, it is easily noticeable and distracting. If the content is weak and the presentation is even weaker, then it's a major problem. This is Sakuga's fans' worst nightmare. There's a scene where they didn't bother to draw an angle view of the crowd. Instead, they used straight up real photo of a real convention. It's not done for gag, it's done because of production crisis. That's sad. The sound department isn't so bad, but it's forgettable. Actually, I have nothing more to say than is there. The dialogues can be baffling to hear, let alone read. It sounds like it's self-aware that it is bad, almost like a satire. The ending just happens, with an awkward twirly animation no less. It's amazing that it exists with this execution. This series contains an average content with an atrocious animation. It will be remembered for the presentation for all the wrong reason. I won't be so harsh on the animators if we were to believe they had a serious problem with time and budget on their hands. I salute them to even try. With that said, it was best to leave it alone rather than trying. It's a large mess that was best to be non-existent in the first place. Thanks to this series, the quote from Star Wars couldn't be any more justified. There is no try. Well, you most likely saw this coming. I mean, with a title like that, how could you not be curious? On the day of high school graduation, Itsuki meets with his cousin Mario for an announcement. She's pregnant. Out of nowhere, a light appears and transports them into the world of Granvania. However, the world is in danger from impurities, causing a disturbance to the stars. It turns out that Itsuki is the chosen one, and he is destined to meet with the Star Maidens. His mission is to meet with these maidens to produce star children and battle against impurities. It is Granvania's last hope. Yeah, could you imagine going into the series without knowing the definition of conception? Won't that line about pregnancy throw you off? This series is likely to be in everyone's worst anime of 2018 list, and understandably so. It's such a bizarre concept to begin with. It's based on an old PlayStation Portable game that's somehow getting a remaster or remake version. But you know something? As strange as it sounds, perhaps it could work somehow. Does it? Of course not, don't be ridiculous. There's no actual plot despite the world being in peril most of the time. I forgot that's the situation. Instead, it rather focuses on how the chosen one will get down with each maiden. Yes, all 12 of them. It's basically a harem series. In other words, the whole plot about saving the world is practically a side quest. If you think you will receive a hentai, you won't get any. Sure, it goes back to the plot, I think, at times, including the end, but for 80% of the runtime, it's all about him getting them to carry his babies. Yep. How is this getting a remaster again? The 12-star maidens are your typical standard trope of harem girls. One is eccentric, the other one is shy, and so on and so forth. I don't know how the game works, but these girls are as single-dimensional as they can get. They're just there as advertisements before you pick up the game. Find a wife that suits you the best, even if you do end up with all of them. Iski is like a basic character in a love simulator game. No real character, all action reflect on one thing. Get someone to carry his baby. Then you have the raccoon panda looking creature named Mana. She's pretty ratchy. I got nothing else to say. There's a small piece of action, and by that I do mean fighting in a lair, if you can even call it that. It's so forgettable that the series doesn't even show it most of the time. They enter the hall, they return from the hall with a couple of cuts. That's it. You're expecting intense clashes with enemies? Don't be ridiculous. Why have a combat when you can have a reused bedroom setting with a different maiden for the guy to get his baby? Reminder, it's not a hentai, so don't get twisted. When it comes down to direction, it's actually a Monster of the Week structure. Or should I say Maiden of the Week. Sure, there is very little of combat, but it's for the best anyway. The animation is pretty weak with stiff movements and cheap battle sequence. It's on the opening for crying out loud. Not even the ecchi scene has anything to offer with lousy creativity. I can't believe I just said that. Bottom line is cheap. Art is no better as well. It's not spot the error on easy mode like My Sister, My Writer, but it's still rough. Oh Gonzo, what happened to you? I'm just going to pretend Hinomaru Zumo is the only adaptation. This anime is quite something else. The concept itself is strange, so it's pretty much like walking into an obvious trap. When am I supposed to expect otherwise? It knows what kind of crap they're in. Even the ending is just a throwaway ending with a random power-up and a resolution that everyone can win. It's laughable. I'm amazed that it didn't make me cringe. Did I grow accustomed to crap stuff? Oh god, it's bad. If you're hyped for the game, go for it. Advertisement or not, there's no way around it. It's easily my worst anime of 2018.